So I was 7 years old, sitting at home with my mom, watching TV, eating my favorite snack of oatmeal cookies and milk. And on the TV comes a program that shows severely malnourished and impoverished children. And I said to my mom, I want to send those kids my money. So we got my little pink porcelain piggy bank, and we emptied it of every last coin and sent it to the organization. I have heard it said that what you're called to do becomes apparent from a young age if you're perceptive enough to see the thread. My parents migrated here from Puerto Rico, and they worked extremely hard to provide for their 5 children. We were in Jersey City, experiencing the dream, Disney World vacations, endless amounts of empanadas and shopping, and life was pretty good. When I turned 8, we encountered severe financial hardship, resulting in the loss of our home, business, and my puppy Buster. Knowing what I know now, I am blessed to stand before you as a free woman. And why do I know that? A few miles down the road in Newark, New Jersey, I met a beautiful, intelligent young girl named Adelina. She was 19. Trying to finish high school, growing up in poverty, and helping her mom raise her siblings, until a family member attempted to rape her. When I heard her story, I had no words. When her mom heard her story, she kicked her out of the home. And it was there our paths crossed at the crisis shelter in Newark, where I was hosting a women's empowerment conference. And despite everything Adelina had been through, she was full of so much hope and joy for the future. She wanted to finish high school, go on to culinary school, and most importantly to her, reunite with her siblings. But she started to show up with these expensive sneakers, a new phone, a new tablet, and a boyfriend that was driving from over 90 minutes away to come and see her. And my intuition knew that something was off. Sadly, she stopped showing up to the shelter one day. And I hope she's out living her dreams somewhere. But sadly, this is a classic example of how young girls become victims of human trafficking. How was it that Adelina and I ended up in the same shelter under such different circumstances? When I was 19, I was starting my career with Johnson & Johnson as a marketing intern. Thanks to a lot of help and nothing short of a miracle, our family was able to get back on our feet. We all, thank God, have great careers and families. And I was experiencing the dream again, crossing countries off my bucket list like nobody's business. And I came across this harrowing documentary that depicted women and children with pigtails and teddy bears being forced to serve up to 30 men sexually in a day. And I very naively thought that could not be a real thing. But the little girl in me with the piggy bank knew better, and she attempted to rise up, but I silenced her for fear that it would cost me too much, and I reasoned that as one person, I could not make a difference. And the more success that I had in my career, the more arrogant I became. If I made it out of poverty, if I'm self-made, then these people should be able to make better choices. But the more I learned about trafficking, I thought there must be something I could do, and I began to volunteer. Brené Brown has stated that people are hard to hate close up. And I like to borrow that and also say they're hard to judge. And as I sat across the table from Adelina, I had a very scary realization. I was not so different from her, and our stories easily could have been interchanged. Human trafficking is a modern form of slavery. It takes on many forms, making it hard to define or identify. There's sex trafficking, indentured servitude, bonded labor, to name a few. It's a systemic issue, from the 13-year-old girl forced into prostitution by the neighborhood pimp, to the 5-year-old boy lured away to a fishing village, to the mom that's working to make the clothes, to sew the clothes many of us are wearing today. There are 40 million people in slavery around the world and in the United States. 25% of them are children, 75% of them are women and girls, and only 1% will ever see the light of day again. It is inhumane, unfair, and frankly, disgusting. There are 4.5 million people trapped in sexual servitude today. Traffickers use a variety of methods to coerce them to commit sex acts against their will. Some believe they're in romantic relationships, only to be forced into prostitution. Others are forced to sell sex by their own family members. Some are promised jobs like modeling or dancing. They can find themselves in these situations for days, months, or years, and it takes place in a variety of venues, from brothels to fake massage businesses, strip clubs, hotels, motels, and even on the street. There are 8 million people stuck in indentured servitude. Let's take an example of a mom who takes out a loan for $3 to get cough medicine for her son, only to find herself working in an excruciatingly hot kiln with no end in sight. This affects many of the products made available to us in the United States. Cocoa from West Africa, cotton from Uzbekistan, and seafood from Thailand. And in a world where Alexa can reorder your laundry detergent faster than you can tie your shoe, how is that still the reality for so many of our brothers and sisters around the world? Children are also victims of trafficking. Recruiters will enter a remote village and offer money to a grandmother. She'll offer money for the eldest grandchild, who's 5, and even offer money to send the younger children to school. But little does she know, these children will be taken to remote villages to do the job of a grown individual, having to jump and plunge into deep, dark waters to untangle fishing nets. Many of these children will die in those circumstances. But the fish, it will be on our plates in time for dinner this evening. My curiosity with this evil compelled me to go to Moldova. It's the poorest and smallest country in Europe, but it's the 6th most popular place where individuals are recruited from for the purposes of trafficking. And I've talked to you about 40 million people, but I'd like to tell you about one precious girl I spoke to through a translator, though I did not need one, because her eyes said it all. Would she be trafficked next? And what do you say to that? I told her there was a God in heaven who heard her cry, that I heard her story, and I would be sure to share it. When I returned from Moldova, my amazing family and colleagues wanted to know how they could help, but I couldn't find the words for over 2 months for fear of doing her story an injustice. And I thought long and hard about who could be to blame. The police don't do enough. The politicians are corrupt. The NGOs misuse our money. But no. It is a principle we all know very well, and that is supply and demand. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world, with growth rates and profit margins that any of us would envy. It generates $150 billion a year in revenue. It is all very simple. If no one were demanding these services, there would be no slaves. And I could point my finger at everybody else, but I decided by assessing my own supply chain. That's how I decided to start. Let's take fashion as one example. I love clothes. It's a way to break up the monotony in my life, to show my personality, add some variety. But I found myself in this cycle where enough was never enough, and I got something new, and the newness wore off, and I had to refill it and try something else. And I had to start asking myself some questions. Why do I have the constant need to consume? What am I trying to achieve? And truly, at what cost? And if I am making a purchase, which is wonderful for the economy, I ask another set of questions. Who's making these garments, and under what circumstances? Practically speaking, I emailed the top stores I shopped from, and I asked them if their clothes were being made ethically, and very importantly, if the employees were being paid a living wage, which is different from a minimum wage. I unfollowed the bloggers on social media because I will decide if my clothing is in or out of style. Thankfully, there's a groundswell of momentum building in the fashion industry. There's a lot of apps and resources cropping up to help us become better and more informed consumers. One example is the annual Ethical Fashion Report. Is it hard? Sure. I can't buy whatever catches my eye, and I might have to spend a little more money. But if I think about the person enslaved to make it for me, it makes it a lot easier to give them a voice by how I spend my hard-earned dollar. A lot of this rolls over into our consumption of sex as a society. There's so much that goes into the narrative that women are less than, and that it's okay to use, reuse, and discard them. Daniel Walker is an undercover agent and informant on trafficking. He's traveled the world over and met people or men from every walk of life. Doctors, lawyers, drivers, builders, businessmen. Some were single, many were married. And they also found sex as a way to break up the monotony in their day and to add some variety and excitement. But he found without exception that the very men that were consuming these services and creating the demand were themselves enslaved to an insatiable desire of lust and greed. You could ask many similar questions. Why do I have the constant need to consume? How did this person come to be in the brothel, pornography, or strip club? What's their story? I'm asking you to place worth and dignity upon every human being. $150 billion is an insane amount of money. We have the opportunity to free entire nations of poverty if we stop purchasing sex, which is not a necessity, and spent it in other industries. I believe that to whom much is given, much is required. Anytime you can decide to make a donation, a purchase, or not purchase something is a great day because it means you have strength in your bones, you have breath in your lungs, and you are not the enslaved one. I believe that the world of the generous grows larger and larger. That has absolutely been the case for me, as I've stopped clinging to things that have no meaning or bearing on my life or eternity. My world has expanded with the countless youth I've been able to mentor by meeting activists working in the trenches to see change in our lifetime, and with the hope of seeing millions freed. I believe everyone listening to this talk is an agent of change. You are kind, amazing, generous people. I believe that you can, and I pray that you will take back your power through consumption. What does Moldova or Thailand or Newark have to do with any of us? We are one humanity. I am not only proud to be an American, I am proud to be human. Thank you.